So one of the things that we should notice, I think, as we move from chapter 50 into 51 is that the chapter heading should be crossed out because the text shows a continuous flow in the thought.
Yeah, very good point. Several commentators tell us that they are artificial boundaries. You should ignore them. So today we will finish up Jeremiah 50, and from next time we would start Jeremiah 51. And before launching into Jeremiah 50, I want to present something I have been telling for a few weeks from now. You must learn to look at a system and describe it truthfully. You must learn to look at a system, examine it carefully, and evaluate it truthfully, and able to make inferences or able to make conclusions truthfully. So without any bias, without any favor or favoritism or the negative energy, sometimes you are drawn away from a system because of various reasons. So any repulsion or attraction, you should control and actually put them aside and look at a system objectively. So foundational, not only for prophecy, but also for our salvation. The truthful evaluation is very important. The truthful evaluation is very important. So, as you learn this skill of looking at a system and explaining it or concluding it, describe it truthfully, you begin to see not only at its surface, but you begin to see the in totality of a system, the totality of system. So you would be beginning to see through the system, not only look at the system, you look through the system. That's important. As you grow in godly discernment, with the help of God's Holy Spirit, you would be able to see through. When we say system, we always mean, what I mean at least, most people would mean this. The system has components. Individual components are parts. These parts or components are brought together and they form a system. These components, they are independent of each other. They are different and dissimilar from other parts or other components, but they come together and form a whole. That is the idea. The whole is always more and greater than the sum of its parts. Each part may have a value or a capability or a capacity individually. But if you sum all the individual attributes, if you come to 100 points for individual capabilities, when they are brought together and they form as a whole, the whole's capabilities are much, much greater than the 100 points. It could be 1,000 or 10,000. So it's a multiplication when these components come together. So we have to evaluate a system in terms of its components and in terms of each component, how it contributes to this system. So it's very generic. And when we say a system can be anything. It can be just a man or a woman, an individual. You can look at that person as a system, or you can look at a family, mother, father, son, daughter, son-in-law, daughter-in-law, mother-in-law, or father-in-law, the whole unit, typical family. You can have a holistic view of that family and approach it as a system and you should be able to describe that system, that family. Then you can go for a city and a country, and you can evaluate a church and a small church, or you can even evaluate a Zoom room, our Zoom room. Truthfully, you can evaluate and able to describe what it is. And finally, we encounter two kinds of systems. One is inorganic or not organic whole, and the second is the organic whole. There's a fundamental difference between the two models. So let me start and explain the first model, which is not an organic whole. So car is a good illustration of a system. Now here, car has several parts. You can see that each part is brought together. All these parts are brought together and they form a system. The system is car, which moves when driver drives it, and it is used for transport. That is the essential purpose of a car. And car has several internal parts as well as external parts. You have moving parts and non-movable parts. The non-movable parts are sometimes called the body or the skeleton or the basic infrastructure that wouldn't move. That is a basic framework. First is placed, and then the components or pieces are put together. So when you look at a car, don't look it as a car. Look at it as the assembly of different parts. So that's how you have to learn the components. You have rear view mirror, you have window frame, seat, windshield wiper, steering wheel, windshield washer, air filter, battery, distributor, radiator, alternator, oil filter, disc brake, body side, molding, line shaft, muffler, transmission, wheel, spare wheel, tail light, and trunk. This means that you have parts, different parts. Some of them are more important than others. In this sense, some of them are critical. If those parts fail to work, then the car wouldn't move. It fails to serve the total purpose of a vehicle for transporting you and me. So the engine is essential. That's an important part, and your steering wheel, very important. And how about the headlights? It's not critical. Car can still run without headlights, at least in the daytime. And how about the spare wheel? It can run without spare wheel if you want to take a risk. How about wheel? It's essential. Car would not move without wheel, without transmission. So there are external parts as well as internal parts. So the internal parts are not visible when you look at a car. What you see is outward appearance. So the external parts like headlights and the color of the car, the wheels and the trunk and the windows, those things you see from outside. So any system has the visible components, and it also has a concealed components like your engine. All these things are not visible. And then you have moving parts and non-moving parts. But all of them independently, if you take, they have limited or no use, no value. If you take a wheel, what would you do with that? If you take a battery, what would you do with it? If you take an oil filter, itself, it does not have any value. But when you bring them and put them together and assemble it, it has greater value as a whole. So the whole is more than sum of its parts. So this is how we look when we look at a system. When God says a beast with 10 heads and 7 horns, or 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns, and it has feet like feet of a bear, and mouth and jaws like jaws of a lion. What do? Those are all components. All the components are put together, and we see an entity that is shown to the prophets. So we have to approach a system in terms of its visible parts and invisible components. And in totality, we should look at the system. But how would this system run? It also needs interaction with outside the world. It needs fuel to start with, gasoline, and it also needs a road or a street and the street signs, and it also needs an origin as well as a destination for a basic run of a car. So it interacts with other systems, it interacts with other cars, it interacts with traffic lights, it interacts with the traffic signs. So there's an external relationship, but the internal relationship as a system, they are all brought together. They work dependently, not independently. Each component is dependent on other components, and every component is dependent on other components. And this is a generic view of a system which is not organic. But we also have an organic system. When we use an organic whole, the best example is a human body. So we'll go to the organic whole or an organic system. Now here, the organic system, you have human body, it's organic because you can have brain, lungs, bone marrow, stomach, pancreas, bladder, intestines, kidneys, gallbladder, liver, muscles, arteries, heart, larynx, pharynx, all these things. But if you look at a system as a human body, like a medical doctor can look at a system and see initially the infrastructure is skeleton, your bones. Your bones are essential infrastructure. The bones are put together by muscles. The muscles hold the bones together, but bones are the strength and infrastructure. Muscles are those things that put together. And then you have several internal organs. You have heart, lungs, and you have bladder, you have kidneys, all these internal organs. And the whole system, internal organs, are covered by your skin and muscles. But you have external organs, your eyes, your ears, and your hands, your feet, your mouth. All these things are external organs. So when we look at a person, typically we look at the external components, and we don't pay much attention to the internal components. But a seasoned medical doctor, when he looks at a person, probably would see the internal organs as well as the external organs. That's the way you see a system in its totality. How this system interacts with other systems, that is of much bigger analysis. So you have the organs. So this is an organic whole. If you take heart is just a pump. It pumps the blood. And if you take heart as an independent organ or a component, it is useless. It needs blood to pump. And if you have blood and heart, where do you pump? Where do you get the blood from? So you need a connection of arteries. And then the blood is supplied to all the components and it comes back. So you need veins also. The blood flows back. And how the what is the purpose of blood? To move around, to carry oxygen, and to carry nutrients, especially glucose, to all the components. All the components need continual supply of oxygen plus nutrients, especially glucose. This is accomplished by flowing a fluid called blood. The blood circulates and carries. The blood, when it reaches your lungs, that gets oxygen as because of the breathing of the pulmonary system. And then that clean blood is taken to heart and it is pumped. And you have kidneys where the blood is purified and the impurities are removed. And the bladder is the one who stores the impurities in form of urine and then pumps it out. And the skeleton. All these things intricately interdependent on one another. Every component does not have a value on itself, but when they're brought together, you have a living, breathing man or a woman. It's called organic whole. Now, when we differentiate inorganic whole from organic whole, the fundamental difference is life. When you discussed a car, there is no life in that. It's just components, mechanical components are brought together. But here in the human body, it's an organic whole. So when the blood circulates, the whole body lives. When all the internal organs and external organs, they function in a way we can tell and call that they are living. Every component is living. Then you say that man or woman is living. That's the life. It's an organic whole. Now, for example, a sword is brought and thrust through this man, and nobody attends to this man. What happens when a hole is made? The whole blood is drained, and there is not enough blood in the body to circulate and supply oxygen and the nutrients to all the components, all the parts. What happens eventually? The man dies. What happens when man dies? What happens to all the components? All of them die. All of them die. Is it possible that the bladder can be alive while the rest of the body is dead? It is not. This is all or none scenario. In computer science, we have this all or none scenario. Whether all the parts are alive and the man is alive, or all the parts are dead and man is dead. So all or none paradigm is very important. All the churches, all the spiritual entities, most of the places we see this organic whole. When God describes a church, either false church or good church or true church, it is always alluded with an organic whole. It's an organic system. And you can imagine each of the parts as the members of that particular church. And if the body is Babylon, if it changes to Babylon, what happens to all the members? They all die. They all die. If you happen to be the stomach in that allegorical church, when all the other components, bone marrow, spleen, lungs, heart, brain, everything is dead, now you can't hope to make yourself alive with this paradigm. You will be dead when everything, every component, other component is dead. You are automatically dead. This is all or none paradigm. That is the reason God wants you to flee this organic whole. There is no way you can survive when the whole system is plagued with sin, rebellion, and death. The death flows. Interestingly, the circulation of blood maintains and sustains and gives life to the system. The blood is called life. And when blood circulation stops, it is dead. So this is the organic whole. And when the church transforms from true church to a Babylon, this is what the dynamics we are seeing, the death. Now, when the death happens, when the blood no longer is not sufficient quantity is no longer available, the it starves of the quantity of the sufficient quantity or necessary quantity of blood. So the body goes through a process of death, and incredible research is being done how the death happens. They think the latest is that from somewhere in the brain, a signal is sent through all the nerves, the neuroelectrical signals is sent to the rest of the body that it is shutting down. And there is one final signal called death. Some death signal is given, and that signal reaches to every component of the body, and then every component understands that it is final phase of its existence, and they prepare themselves and die. So that's how the man dies. The final shock wave, some electrical impulse that goes and tells everybody we are dying, so everybody dies. If you happen to be in that Babylonian system or that church, you are also dead. That's why God is saying, come out of her, my people, lest you partake of her sins, thereby also partake of her plagues. Because Babylonian system is going to die. It will perish. And you will also perish with that system if you are part of that system, because that system is an organic whole. So this is the idea. And then as we come closer to Revelation, we would see more and more of this dynamics of a system. Now we have systems, one system, and then second system, and the third system. The systems also interact. This gets complex. That's why I want to start early this discussion of looking at systems, either organic or non-organic. There are two systems. So for today, I think this is sufficient. We will go to Jeremiah 50 and finish off rest of the scriptures, rest of the verses in Jeremiah 50. This we discussed last time. I want to just recap verse 39 of Jeremiah 50. Therefore, the wild beasts of the desert with the wild beasts of the islands shall dwell there, and the owls shall dwell there, and it shall be no more inhabited forever, neither shall it be dwelt in from generation to generation. Here, it is like a system or a body that is subjected to death blow. So here, when a building is no longer inhabited by human beings, what happens after 1 year? What happens after 5 years? After 10 years? Nobody is there to take care of it. What happens? You have spiders. You have all the low-level creatures, insects move into the house, and sometimes snakes and scorpions will come into that house. How about birds? All the birds would come and make nest in that. How about animals? If the window is broken, the animals also will come and start living there. If it is a deserted place, a desolate place, you see all the bad animals, bad birds would come, owl and bats, and because they are not disturbed by human beings. So these bad creatures are creatures of darkness. They will come and dwell in that house because it is no longer attended to. There are no longer living people there. That's what is happening here. It's a very allegorical statement God is giving. This will what happened to Babylon in some layer when the judgment is brought on that entity. So let's continue. We have some. For later discussion, one can take humans' body parts as living longer if they transplant in another body it needs, such as kidney. This corresponds to coming out of the Babylon. Okay, Tom, nice. We can perhaps take it in discussion session. Let's go to 40, verse 40. As God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah and the neighbor cities thereof, said the Lord, so shall no man abide thee, neither shall any son of man dwell therein. This is a very important script, very important verse. Here, the way Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding cities are judged, the same way Babylon is judged. What is God is hinting is the judgment on Sodom and Gomorrah is same to Babylon. Perhaps he's hinting they are same entities. You're looking at the same entity from one vantage point of view, it looks like Babylon. From another angle, it looks like Sodom and Gomorrah. Yet another viewpoint, it might look like Egypt. That's why in Revelation 11, we have two witnesses. Their bodies were lying in the streets of that great city. That great city is always Babylon, Mystery Babylon, which is spiritually called Sodom and Egypt. See how coherent and how beautifully agrees the Old Testament with New Testament. So it's Sodom and Gomorrah. That's where the two witnesses, their bodies are lying. It is receiving the same judgment. The Babylon and Egypt also, like Sodom and Gomorrah. We all know Sodom and Gomorrah. The sulfur rained from heaven and burnt everybody. They were decimated through burning. So no wonder Babylon also would be burnt. The city would be burnt in Revelation 17 and 18. So the burning, the judgment on Babylon is same or similar to the judgment of Sodom and Gomorrah. Here it says in a figure of speech and metaphorical Simeon layers, no son of man dwell there. That means as the judgment is progressing or the judgment is about to take place on Babylon, no living man, living son of man is present in the Babylon. That's what it says. No man shall abide in thee, nor any son of man dwell in there. The son of man is a good phrase that is applied to Christ, and perhaps it is also applied to people in Christ. People who are in Christ, they're also living, they have life. No such life person would be there in Babylon. Either they might have fled Babylon, running for their life, or they chose to stay with Babylon. Now they are also dead. So there is no living person, but there are plenty of dead people, the dead. And then the judgment from God is being unleashed on this dead entity, especially in the church layer. It's a dead church. There's no life. There's no Christ or life of Christ. No wonder Christ in Gospel of John said, the words that I speak are spirit and eternal life. The words that I speak are eternal life and they are spiritual and they give life. What if a church does not have any of the words or teachings of Christ? They don't have life. If church is not living the words and instructions of Christ, it's a dead church. They may claim to be Christians. They may claim that they follow Jesus, they love Jesus, but Jesus said, what is the use of calling me Lord, Lord, if you don't do the things that I ask you to do? That's where the God means business. You do what I am asking you to do. Otherwise, there is no point in calling me Lord, Lord, or calling yourselves Christians. It's a hypocrisy. Another thing I wanted to say here in this regard, both these verses 39 and 40, there is a state of death and state of living. As long as an entity is in the state of living or it has life, many of the scavengers would not touch that body. Once the body dies, then you have scavengers in physical realm. You have various scavengers in the birds and in the sky, as well as on the land and also beneath the land. Beneath the land, you have worms. That's the illusion God uses. You have actually hundreds and thousands, perhaps millions of species, subterranean creatures. They're tiny, sometimes they are big. They dwell underneath the earth. They come and eat away the dead body once it is buried. If it is laid open on the ground, then you have other kind of scavengers. You have jackals. You have you have all kinds of scavenging animals. They would come and tear apart this dead body and consume it. And from the heaven, you also have a scavenger birds. Some birds are known for cleaning up the earth from any dead bird or dead animal or dead man. Their sole purpose is to consume the deadness, anything that is dead. This is by design. God created the whole universe. Whole world is like that. So the dead attract some things, the scavengers. So that's why we see owls and other doleful creatures when an entity becomes dead. In fact, that takes us to the spirit realm. When a church is spiritually dead, you have counterparts of spiritual scavengers. The counterparts, spiritual scavengers, would come and consume or feed on the dead bodies or dead churches. So when the church becomes dead, then the demon spirits would come and occupy that place. And it gets worse and worse, darker and darker. This is the script you see all through the scriptures. It's an amazing script. And this is more often applied to Babylon. And sometimes it is very narrowed down and applies to a church, what happens. And in four Gospels, Jesus alludes to this script in a much profound, much bigger way. How these demon spirits would come and dwell in a dead church, or a dead person, or a dead family, or a dead city, or a dead church, or a dead country, or the whole world as a dead place that attracts all the spiritual scavengers when the entities die spiritually. We should not mix the physical layer with spiritual layer. In the physical layer, people or entities physically die, and the physical creatures would come like flies, and all these things would come. In the spiritual layer, people will die spiritually. Physically, they might be alive in a church. They might be singing songs and making great noise and very enthusiastic and call themselves true church. That doesn't matter. Spiritually, they are dead. Now you see the spiritual scavengers come and occupy that and slowly strangle them. That's a very bad, detestable thing. So this is where God is putting scripts behind the scene when he's walking us through and preparing us for this Babylon, how that is judged. Continue 41. Behold, a people shall come from the north. Remember, north is not only the direction of north, but also from God, because God lives in spiritual north. Behold, a people shall come from the north, and a great nation, and many kings shall be raised up from the coasts of the earth. The coasts are the ends of the world or ends of the earth. It has a dual or multi-layered verse. In one layer, spiritual layer, very higher level layers, you see from north, that is from God, a great nation. This is what was promised to Abraham. I will make your seed descendants a great nation, and this great nation is true church resurrected as spirit beings, and they are coming from north, from the presence of God, and many kings shall be raised up from the coasts of the earth, from the ends of the world. The kings are raised and made part of this first resurrection. They are the saints, a great nation coming from north, and they're coming under the leadership of Jesus Christ, who was also called the Lion of the tribe of Judah. And they shall hold the bow and lance. So you have both the weapons. They are cruel and will not show mercy. Now, Jesus Christ and all the saints were well trained in showing mercy, compassion, and forgiveness. Why is this worse? How do we justify that? When the judgment is in progress, when the judgment is under execution, no mercy. No mercy. That's how, from one end of the Bible to other, that's how God operates. Once a nation's sins are full to the brim of that cup and the sins overflow, then the judgment kicks in from God. When the judgment kicks in, until the judgment is completely over, completely reaches its end, there is no place for mercy. There's no place for mercy. But once the judgment is over, we always see a pattern. The mercy kicks in, and there will be few people, a remnant would be left after the judgment, and God starts a new beginning with the remnant. That's a great pattern we see, great scripts we see. So no mercy. They are cruel and show no mercy. This is also true in physical layer. When the Medo-Persians came, they showed no mercy on Babylonians. Their voice shall roar like the sea. The voice, like waves of sea, the ocean or sea. When you sit at the seashore, when you hear the waves and see and hear them, how mighty rush of water. And this is actually alluded to Jesus Christ at several places in Bible. When he opens his mouth and speaks, he roars. It is like the voice of many waters, mighty thundering of waters, rush of waters. So this is also alluding to Jesus Christ, and perhaps the saints. And they shall ride upon horses. Yes, but there are no horses when the physical Babylon was judged. They just silently walked across the dried up Euphrates. But there would be horses in the spiritual layer, the white horses, spiritual horses, the clean and right. All the saints would sit, and in front of them, Jesus Christ upon the white horse, with the word of God coming out of him. He judges and makes war in righteousness to judge Babylon, to consume and decimate it. Everyone put in array like a man to the battle against thee, O daughter of Babylon. This gender is also important for us to keep an eye on. Whenever it says feminine, a daughter of Babylon, Perhaps it's talking to church, the church layer. Verse 43, the king of Babylon has heard the report of them. He's got the report that Medo-Persians are coming. But in fact, when the physical Babylon was conquered by Medo-Persians, there is no report of them. It's a sudden and silent coup. Nobody was expecting Cyrus would come. But here, perhaps this is talking about spiritual layers and end-time revelation Babylon. That's why we don't have matching in the physical layer. And the king gets the news that the invaders are coming. And what is the reaction? The king of Babylon has heard the report of them, and his hands waxed feeble. Anguish took hold of him, and pangs as of a woman in travail. Woman in a travail is an important phrase. The woman in a labor pains is the idea. The labor pains is very interesting. It communicates lots of things. The woman's labor, as she approaches 9th month or whenever, it is bound to happen unless she has a miscarriage. Assuming that she doesn't have a miscarriage, this is bound to happen. The labor and labor pains, and it's only a matter of time. We do not know exact pinpoint of time when the labor pains would start and she would deliver the baby. Just like you do not know exact day or hour when Christ would come back. But you know the season because it is bound to happen on the Babylon to be judged. So as the pangs of a woman in a travail, that is bound to happen, and the anguish took hold of the king of Babylon. The king of Babylon is an allusion to the leadership of this Babylon, this massive Babylon. You see Babylon across many countries, many governments, many people, many financial institutions, Hollywood, Bollywood, and you have in educational institutions, all the faces. You see many faces of Babylon. But here, when we come to these scriptures that are focusing, is the epicenter. There is one man behind the curtain. He's pulling all the strings. He's somewhere hidden behind the scenes. He would not come himself and presents himself as the real guy behind all this Babylon. You can say he is the Babylon, the real Babylon. So it's always hides. So that real Babylon would be caught by Son of God, and he would be decimated first. So the news reaches to that real Babylon, the man behind the scenes. He gets the news. He would be terrified. We also see allusions. Then they see the signs of the coming of Son of Man in heavens. They see the signs and they're terrified. These Babylonians would go to mountains and ask them, fall on us and protect us and hide us from this one who is coming to judge us. We know we can't stand him, Son of God, because he is coming back in great power and great glory. They are more knowledgeable, just like Christians. That's another puzzle. How could they know? Verse 44, behold, he shall come up like a lion from the swelling of Jordan unto the habitation of the strong. He shall come up like a lion of the tribe of Judah, Jesus Christ. He's coming from swelling of Jordan. What is swelling of Jordan? It's a very interesting, intriguing phrases. Jordan, when it was swelling, that's when God said to the priest, take my ark of the covenant, and walk into this swelling, ready to break, ready near flood stage Jordan. Go into the Jordan. So the whole Israelites camp are ready to move. They packed their bags and they dismantled their tents and put everything on the beasts, and they are all tucked and dressed up and ready to move. And the first batch, the first people that would go into Near flood zone Jordan is the batch of priests. They carry the Ark of the Covenant. There are like few priests in the beginning and a few priests on the back. I believe there are 6 priests, if I remember correctly. And these priests have to take the ark, and they were told to walk into Jordan, swelling Jordan. They move into the Jordan. The first priest's feet, when it touches the waters of Jordan, there is a miracle happens. The Jordan separates, and there's a huge way open. On one side, upstream side, the whole Jordan's water was put on hold. It keeps on increasing, and on the downside, there is no water, and way is opened to the riverbed of Jordan, and the priests would go and to walk into the dried out bed of the river, and they go to the midpoint and stand there. And then the rest of the congregation of Israel would go and pass this Jordan. And once the last man passes to the Jordan, then Joshua would ask the priests, come hither to the other side. And the priests with the ark would move and move and move. And they come to the other bank. And the last of the priest's feet, when it leaves the banks of the Jordan, Jordan returns to its full strength. The swelling of Jordan is associated to the setting foot on the promised land by children of Israel. This is equivalent to the resurrection of saints, the first resurrection. And now they are following the lion of the tribe of spiritual Judah, Jesus Christ. And here they're coming to the habitation of strong. Babylonians thought they were the strongest. We are the greatest. Nobody can touch us. But here somebody greater than them is coming to the habitation of strong. But I will make them suddenly run away from her. Who is a chosen man? Here God is in a rhetoric way asking back. Who is a chosen man? Who is that chosen man to accomplish this judgment of Babylon, that I may appoint over her to judge her? Who is this chosen man? And who is like me? I want somebody like me, equivalent to me. A man after my own heart, that is my son. Who is like me? And who will appoint me the time, and who is that shepherd that will stand before me? What a great statement God makes. There are so many allusions here. God is hinting that he is talking about Jesus Christ. That shepherd that will stand before me. We can spend the rest of the night just on this verse, but I want to move on. Verse 45. Therefore hear ye the counsel of the Lord, the warnings and the advices and the instructions of the Lord. Hear the instructions of the Lord that he has taken against Babylon. Babylon is decided to be judged. Babylon is done once for all. Hear what God has purposed, and his purposes that he has purposed against the land of the Chaldeans. This is the intelligentsia of Babylon, all the cream and intellect. Surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. The least of the flock. There's so many verses that come to our mind. Surely he shall make their habitation desolate with them. There's a verse that says, the weakest and the feeble among the true church, let him shout like a warrior. The least of the flock shall draw them and knock down Babylon, because now they were given spiritual bodies. Now they are given power of resurrected saint. And they were weak. Perhaps they were killed by this Babylon, end time Babylon. They were martyred. Their blood flew, and their bodies laid in the streets of Babylon, the spiritual Babylon. Now they're resurrected. Now their time to show the justice and judgment of God under the leadership, under the direction of Son of God, their Savior, who paid for their penalties, who redeemed them with his own precious blood. Now they are made white and they are following the armies of heaven. What a fantastic picture of the world called Babylon now being judged. Verse 46, at the noise of the taking of Babylon, the earth is moved and the cry is heard among the nations. This epicenter, this man behind the scene, he's taken out, and the effect and the tremors are felt among all the nations. Whole earth is moved. The effects are felt because the sinister guy that is behind the scenes, controlling and pulling the strings, is knocked down. It's a relief to the whole earth. That brings us to the end of the chapter 50. I think I'll take up 51 next time. The reason I'm going slow is these would sink slowly. The important necessity for you and me is this information has to sink within us. Only when we go slow, this would sink and we get super familiar with the data. So with that, I will stop share and open the room for discussion. Yes, Dan.
Yes. A little while ago, you talked about being part of a dead church. How can we prevent ourselves from becoming part of a dead church? I'm done.
So you're asking about a church being dead and how it is judged, right? If I just want to understand your question correctly.
Well, what I what I wanted to know was what steps can we take to prevent ourselves from becoming part of a dead church? Or I guess another way of wording it, what are the signs of a dead church? So if we see we're involved in that, we can take the correct steps. I'm done.
Yes, that's obviously there's a continual evaluation and spiritual discernment without which you cannot decide. And the point, the turning point, you can say, the turning point when a church becomes Babylon is abomination, desolation. Because in Matthew 24, Christ said, when you see the abomination that makes desolate, flee, run for your life. So at that point, you should not delay. So the abomination, desolation is the turning point. But what is abomination, desolation? And how do you know? And how long was the abomination, desolation? That's also a big subject, mega subject. But maybe abomination, desolation was already set up. You're not seeing. When you are not seeing, that's probably okay. But when you see, that's what words of Christ, when you see, you flee. Or whenever you see, you flee. Or the abomination, desolation has not yet come, but God is giving you sensitivity to see the actual progress of abomination, desolation. Now, boom, you're pretty sure this is the abomination, desolation. Run for your life. So the abomination, desolation, what it is the passing of death wave in a human body is equivalent. But yeah, go ahead, continue your question, Stan.
Yes, and I'm sure that there are times when the abomination of desolation will be very subtle and indirect. Correct? I'm done.
It is not if you are following the scriptures with the spiritual discernment, because the description and instructions are have no ambiguity. Because we are not studied this enough, we are not taught. That's why the subject is obscure. It's kind of difficult to discern. But once you vet through the Olivet prophecy, Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 24, 27, all these 100 verses, once we go through that, it becomes ample clear. Actually, it's a crystal clear. Now you are equipped and armed with the whole discernment, what to look for and what to look for, the turning point of the abomination, desolation. And if you are in spiritual Judea, run for your life. That's the thing. And yeah, keep asking. It's hard to explain in one sentence, but
Okay, well, thank you for your answer. I will sit and listen to other people contribute. I'm done.
okay, thanks, Stan, for the question. Let's go to Willard next.
Okay, I want to stir the pot probably, but I think one of the things that contributes to the difficulty of understanding of what you're talking about there is the very term church. The church is derived from an ancient Greco-Roman term of kirk, and it literally means circus. And I can't think of a term that fits better what has become the Christian churches of the world today. If we would use what it's translated from the Greek of ecclesia, or ecclesia, I suppose it is, isn't it? It is a called out ones, and we called out ones. It doesn't matter where on the face of the earth you are. We don't have to be members of some 501(c) organization. It doesn't matter what congregation or what group of people, like-minded people that we gather with. We are a collection of called out ones scattered about the whole face of the earth. And these, we have to think, we can't worry about God saving the church. He's not going to save the circus. I think the circus is pretty well doomed. But his called out ones, his children, those who obey and love him and live their lives for him, should feel very secure in the promises that he has made to us. And it's been a travesty that our Bibles have been filled with this terrible mistranslation. And I hope I'm not, I don't mean to sound like I'm unloading, I'm not. But we need to think of us more highly of our Creator. Thanks for listening to me.
No problem, Willard. You touched very, very important subject. They called out ones, ecclesia, ekkaleia, you're called. It's a war cry to come out of Babylon and be separate. Come to me. That's the definition of true church. So you're called, but essentially that's a spiritual concept, because Babylon is spiritual and Zion is spiritual. There is no way of knowing Babylon unless you know its spiritual signatures. Same is with true church, Zion. There is no way of knowing it unless you analyze it and examine it and describe it truthfully. That's what we began our study. Looking at a system and analyzing and understanding and truthfully describing, those are the fundamental basic steps, either to recognize true church or the false church. So here is the difficulty. You go by the signatures and character and the pattern matching. Now, there are two ways people try to identify Babylon. One is the physical clues, and second is spiritual clues. The physical clues, for example, the names, the church. The word church comes from a root word that is a dead body. Corpse comes from corpse. Corpse and church both come from some root word people, researchers have found, that's a dead body. So that's a physical clue. So with this physical clue, can you say wherever the word church is there, would they automatically be a dead church? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. You have to go by its patterns and signatures. The second physical clue people would use is 5013C. That's for US only, not for the world. So if this particular group is registered with US government and receives tax exemption and blah, 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 you are part of Caesar, part of the beast system, all these things, these are physical clues. Is it possible for a 5013C church could be a dead church? Possible. But the Bible doesn't give us that kind of freedom. The physical clues might be helpful for you, but those are not reliable always. I would, as a teacher, I would say go with spiritual signatures. What is the character? What are the components? What's happening inside the system? Not only you look at the system, but you see through the system. That's the kind of spiritual discernment you would eventually grow. Your eyes would be, your mind would be like X-ray machine. You see through the bodies, see through the systems. And that's essential for you to understand whether it is a Zion, that is true church, or Babylon. I honestly don't see the physical clues would really give us, help us much. There's also going wrong with physical clues. If I say all the 5013C church registered churches are all dead and false churches, what if somebody were not aware of this 5013C thing about the US laws, but they might be still not subjected to abomination, desolation? There is a theoretical possibility of that church could still be a Zion. But if you use physical clues alone, we tend to err. So I would recommend go with spiritual signatures. There is a less likely that you would make a mistake or error. But that's my long answer to your long question. Do you have any further comment or question on this? Willard?
Thank you, sir. It occurred to me while you were speaking, oversimplification here, but in a sense, Babylon is Antichrist.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your question. Let's go to Alan.
Yeah, I'm going back to answer Stan's question.
Thank you.
How do we not, I think his question was, what can we do to not become dead? Was that what he said? Something along those lines. I want to share my screen for a moment.
Stan, would you mind repeating your question? Because he wants to answer that.
Or maybe stepped away. You out there, Stan?
Yeah, I was asking, how do I know if that church became dead? How do I know? When should I return? Run away? That's kind
Can
of
you see my
question.
Can you see my screen here?
Yes.
We're working in Revelation chapter 3, and unto the angel of the church in Sardis write these things. Says, he that hath the 7 spirits of God and the 7 stars. I know your works. I know everything about you. That you have a name, and that even though you're alive, you are dead inside. Be watchful. Now, you could just stop right there and spend a lot of time on what it means to be watchful. Watchful for what? This is how we exercise ourselves to not die. Number one is by being watchful, being fully aware, you could say, and being able to examine your own condition as well as the condition of those around you. Not that you would want to examine them to condemn them, but that you just be fully aware and strengthen the things which remain. Whatever you got that's left, you have some faith left? Do you still have some truth? Do you still have love towards some? Strengthen those core things that are necessary and then continue to grow in those things. If you want to not die, this is the instruction right here. Be watchful and strengthen your faith and the truth. If you have some truth, strengthen that truth. Those things that are ready to die or to perish or to completely disappear, strengthen those things, because I have not found your works in doing those things perfect. You haven't been strengthening them perfectly, but you've been letting it slack and slip. So now stop and repent of allowing that to happen. I think this is one of the things we can do to not die. Remember, therefore, the things that you had received in the past and the things you heard. From who? From the apostles and from the words of Christ. So remember, don't let yourself forget, because if you do, you're going to die. And the things you received and heard, hold fast, hang on, cling to them, and let no man take your crown here. And repent and turn away from not holding fast to those things you received and heard. So I think this is a kind of I'm giving a very surface, simplistic answer to the question, but these guidelines are supreme for the church that he said was dead and dying. So for Stan's question, what do we do to not die? These are some things, some starting points, I think, that could be helpful.
Thank you, Alan, for this very appropriate piece of scriptures that you referenced. Thank you. I don't know if Stan has stepped out. When he comes back, we'll tell him. Yes, please, Alan.
Yeah, one of the things that we see in verse 43 is about as a woman in childbirth, the pangs. It says in the New King James, pangs. Anguish has taken hold of him, pangs as of a woman in childbirth. And we remember the curse that was given to Eve, that there would be great pain in childbirth. Part of the original curse from being put out of the garden. And as we read through much of scripture, we see women dying from childbirth. That's part of the curse of this pang of a woman in childbirth. Even Jacob's wife, Rachel, dies while giving birth to Benjamin. And Eli's wife, or his son's wife, dies giving childbirth, and she names the child Ichabod, which is symbolic name for the glory of the Lord has departed. If you go back and read that in 1 Samuel. So this idea of women having pangs of childbirth is a kind of a curse, and it represents death in some cases. Now, in this case, it does represent death, the death of Babylon. So we see that this phrase has some long-range symbology built into it. That's all.
Yeah, that's true. In Revelation 12, New Jerusalem, our mother, she's also in pain. She was also travailing. She was pregnant, but the other verses tell us she's also travailing, labor pains. So that's a good labor pain that she brought forth the male child, Jesus Christ, who is going to rule the world with a rod of irons and dash the nations to pieces. So it's a naturally occurring phenomenon. Perhaps God has added more pain to the labor. But here, definitely, to Babylon, it's much negative sense. It's not going to stop. The judgment will come on Babylon. So that you're right. Any other comment on system? The system and components brought together, a whole is formed. Sometimes people use the word collective. I forgot to introduce that. Maybe next time I will introduce collective. Yes, Willard, please.
I'm going to be a smart aleck. My system is very tired. And I have to be at 5 in the morning, Eastern.
Okay.
And I have enjoyed tonight so very much, and I thank you, Tagore, and all of you who have commented. And I love this group, and I hate to leave you, but hopefully, God willing, I'll see you again on Friday evening, and really look forward to it. So, thank you for the bright spots in my life. Good night, all.
Good night, Willard.
Good night,
Good night,
Will.
Willard.
Good night, Willard.
Thank you for your nice contribution.
He said his system needs rest.
Yeah. I'll say one more thing about systems, especially the organic. I think, did you use the word organic? No.
Organic whole,
Organic.
WHOLE, or non-organic whole. Yeah.
Yeah, any organic system is exceedingly complex because the individual interacting members that are dependent on one another are very complex and interdependent for them to function on a healthy level. So it's described in the Ecclesia, right? The hand cannot say to the foot, I don't need you. The eye cannot say to the ear. So all the parts are necessary in the organic systems of the spiritual temple. As it says in Ephesians, you are all being built up into the house of God to make components for that house. Individual members doing their share, doing their parts. So it can be very complicated. And sometimes I think we don't understand the function of others if it's not our function. And we should realize that. We should try to realize that I can't really understand other people's functions because it's not mine and I'm not gifted that way. So I should receive and understand it, and I should be the recipient of the benefits of others, even though I may not fully understand as an eye what the ear does. So I just wanted to say it's a very complex matter. We have to be careful not to denigrate just because we don't understand.
Yeah, more often you're right. We despise others we think their role is much smaller. This happens especially with respect to teachers' role. Traditionally, we have pushed up teachers above the congregation. That's unfortunate. That's not the right thing. Teacher happens to be one of the components of the body. There are others through whom God would feed and nourish the whole ecclesia. The teachers also have this pride because they don't look at this model of organic whole. You have to humble yourself and downgrade and downsize yourself. Just do the job faithfully, what God has given you. That's all you have to do until your last breath. So teachers, others, congregation should not push up teachers, and teachers should not push themselves up. With respect to other offices, like administrators, sometimes probably push themselves up, and the lay brethren just they put hand around another brother or sister around their shoulder and just silently encourage. I am with you. I feel for you. That has equal contribution to an hour of teaching. We don't see like that. We see an hour of teaching has greater value than a brother or a sister laying his or her hand around another brother or sister and saying silently, I am with you. It's equally important and equally profound and equally valuable in God's eyes. As long as we do it, the problem is we don't do it. So we have to rethink, reapproach the way we look at the ecclesia, the system among each other. So that's a great subject that you have raised, Alan. You want to go to Stan?
Yeah,
Yes. With regard to teachers, I think it's easy for a teacher to fall into the trap of thinking, I know something you don't know, instead of thinking of himself or herself as a servant. And actually, if we all thought of ourselves as servants of each other in the body would be a lot healthier. I'm done.
You're so right. You're right on the point. Stan, appreciate your comment very much. We should all be like this, what you mentioned. We should develop that culture and maintain that culture of equality and respect. Let's go to Marlene. Welcome, Marlene.
Thank you. Really appreciate your message. I think what we're lacking is this understanding of the members of the spiritual body in the three places that God talks about those. Because you've got in Romans 12 the list of these gifts, and Ephesians 4, and 1 Corinthians 12, and it lists all these gifts. And if you realize these are all what members of Christ's spiritual body are, then you would look at each other from that point of view and realize, yeah, the value of the compassion person is very important compared to the giver and the administrator and all the other gifts. And realize people aren't looking at things through your eyes if you're the compassion person, compared to, one of the givers or so on. And realize your gift is a special gift from God. And you need to learn to use all the other gifts because God is all of those things. And then you've got your teachers, your shepherds, your evangelists, and all those, the miracles and all the list that goes on. And so to realize, yeah, these people have these gifts, acknowledge that, support it, and realize what your gifts are and use them as God blesses you and puts you in situations to use your gifts. So I think that's part of the problem is we don't see those spiritual gifts that God gives his spiritual body and appreciate them and not exalt yourself, as you mentioned. It's like, it's a constant struggle and awareness just of these gifts.
Right. And I might add, it's important when you figure out what your gift is, that you don't overuse it,
Or abuse
because
it, yeah.
it's like, you know, the old saying, when all you've got is a hammer, the whole world looks like a nail. And it just overusing it is abusive. And I've taken the tests and I realize I'm an administrator. As an administrator, my job is to get it done. It doesn't matter who you damage on the way through, and how many people fall by the wayside. As long as you succeed in getting where you're supposed to go and get the mission done, that's all you have to worry about. So I've always surrounded myself with people that were more compassionate. And they would tell me, it's time to stop and take a break, Tom. You're killing these people. Let's go out and have a party. And so then the compassionate person would organize the party, and we'd all have a good time. And it worked out well.
Get back to work.
And then we got back to work.
Yeah.
What advice do you give to those people who have gift of teaching? How can they overdo their gift?
If you look at the gift of teaching, it's you'll find out that it's not just teaching. What it is it's understanding the words. Our one of our daughters is a teacher, has a teacher gift, and every time we would try and explain things to her, she would say, well, what does that word mean? What does that word mean? What does that? I mean, it's like a broken record, and you'd have to go into all these details on what it means. There are some people, if you know Hal Geiger, he is a teacher, and he will always bring out definition of words. Well, that word means this, and it's used over here, and it means different over here. So that's what the teacher gift is. It's not necessarily that you want to explain something. It's that they want to know what it is specifically that word means, and why I should use that one.
So it's like in Romans 12 where it lists the 7 gifts, and the teacher gift there, that's the one that it's not necessarily a teacher as a career, because compassion people make really great teachers and exhorters and so on. The teacher there, it's talking about how you want to know in depth the definition of the words. And then I think one of the others where it talks about the teacher, as long as a shepherd and evangelist and all that, which I think Tagore is where you'd fit in with that also. I think that's what you're asking about. Yeah, it's an abuse of a gift, like you mentioned about thinking you're better than everybody else because you have all this knowledge and understanding, and the rest of us are trying to understand it. And you've already mentioned the pitfalls that you're aware of, I think. Yeah, or the abuse of just all you do is study, and you don't do anything else. Your life is not balanced. It's typical things with all of the gifts. You can't overuse them. And probably the most obvious one is the server gift. They just don't know how to say no, and they will just run themselves into the ground, sick and, health problems because they don't say no. And that's an abuse of your gift. So.
There are people that we know that were speaking at the lectern, and they were the server type of a person, and they literally just stopped and kind of stared off into the sky, almost froze. They just froze up, and they wore themselves right out.
Heart problems.
And they had heart problems and everything else. So they sort of retired for a while from the duty of speaking and leading and everything else, because they couldn't take it. It was just too much. They wore themselves out. So if you find somebody that's always serving, you have to be careful not to ask them to do things, because they will do it and they will kill themselves doing it.
That's right. Well, I'm taking your heed to your advice. I'm taking 3 weeks off in first 3 weeks of May.
Congratulations.
Sounds like a good time.
Party on.
We'll resume after third week in May. Don will publish the calendar. So 3 weeks, you will not have teachings of prophecy or even the Friday evenings. Just want to take off. Like I'm beginning to see that I'm getting burnt out
Mhm.
with the 2 series that are going on. So I
Yeah.
need some time off and then breathe fresh air. I'll go to Atlanta and spend some time.
Sounds good.
Good for you. Yeah. We'll miss you. That's for sure.
Thank you. I think we'll get back to Stan.
Yeah, with regard to teaching, I know I was a high school math teacher and I'm subbing now in the high
Yep.
school level. And with the teaching and subbing combined, this is my 45th year in a high school classroom, and I still love it. And I've discovered a couple of important things that it's important. One, it's important to talk to people and not at them. And it's interesting. It's so easy to talk at people. I've had instructors in graduate school, and when they taught, they were well-meaning, but you would think that they were delivering a soliloquy. And it's so easy to do that, just to stand up in front of a group of people and recite, whether it's facts or figures or names or dates, and you're talking as if nobody is in the room. Another facet I've learned is important is teaching is not one way. It's not a one-way street where good teaching, in my opinion, where a person gets up there, he or she spews out whatever knowledge he or she wants to disseminate, and then they leave the podium and they're done. I think a good teacher does encourage dialogue, a two-way street. And it may take some planning and effort to do that, but I believe that's a very effective part of it. I'm done.
Thank you, Stan, for very important advice you are giving. First, don't talk to the room, talk to the people. And second thing, make it interactive, two-way. We often think about this two-way for our Bible studies, but in some groups, there's too many interruptions, so we end up not teaching anything. So we adopted this model of teaching it for 45 minutes to an hour, and then we will start interactive discussion on what was just presented. So that's the model. I'm not saying that is the ideal model. I would probably be happier to have more interactive, but practically do not know how to do it. If you all have matured audience, if you don't go on rabbit trails too much, then probably we should have interactive. But in my experience, the interactive failed because it was all interaction, people talking, and nothing was presented eventually at the end of the evening. It was just discussion. So it's because of the practical difficulties. But if you have any suggestions that you want this discussion, at least like prophecy insights, like if you want to be more interactive, I can put more stops during the presentation and ask, what do you think? If you like that kind of thing, let me know. Yes, Stan.
But I don't mean to contradict you, but I think the way you conduct the prophecy insights, I think you have a healthy balance of presenting material and then the presentation is over and you open up the floor for interactions. I think that's a very healthy balance that you have. I agree with you. Now the Kape clutch is a lot of discussion and there's a time and place for that. But when you're presenting, I don't mean to keep repeating myself, but I think you've struck a very healthy balance between going over verses, bringing out some thoughts and viewpoints, and then when you feel you have covered enough material, okay, the floor is open, we can now discuss. I think you've done a very good job in striking a balance between the two. I'm done.
Thank you very much, Stan, for the feedback. Yes, Tom.
I presented once and I asked for some input about maybe 15, 20 minutes into it. And that was a bad idea. Because it went all over the place. And I guess we've got to be very careful in how we when we go through something, well, how we ask the question at that point, so that it stays concise and it doesn't keep going on and on and on and on. And then I can never get back to where I was, which was a problem. So I didn't do that again. I just went through the rest of my presentation. Then I asked, hey, open for discussion. So I think it's how you structure your presentation. And if you want to know something, just if someone has a question, it's nice to be able to answer a question when you're going through it instead of waiting until the end. And that's why I put that little note in the chat box. It wasn't necessarily that you had to do anything now. It's just that I didn't want to forget it and left it there. Sorry about that. But it interrupted your flow, and I didn't want to do that.
That's the
That's all.
main difficulty. You're right. It disturbs the presenter's mind and thought process. So
Yeah, that's not what I wanted to do. I just threw it in the chat box as let's check on it later.
this we tried in Johnny Snyder's room and failed totally. We have Bill Hillebrunner, Dennis Pilkington. You have giants in that room. The moment you stop for a discussion point, you would never come back to the main presentation. They just take over. So every time I reach my first discussion point, that's it. And finally, after 45 minutes, Johnny Snyder would say, let's get back to the main discussion. Tagore, go ahead to your next point, second point. I couldn't even cover the second point because the whole time is consumed by the rabbit trails and tangents, and people want to talk and talk and talk. So if you have disciplined audience, probably we can have a little bit more interactive. Otherwise, you are asking for a disaster. There are thoughts. Yeah.
You know, you should be able to shut someone's mic off and just notify them that you've gone off topic. And after you do that a dozen times, people will be more careful not to embarrass themselves. If you go off topic, you need to be told, I'm sorry, but you're going off topic. We have to stay on topic. When you make your comments, please make sure they're pertinent to the topic of the study. So just nip it in the bud right away.
Mm-hmm. That's a good idea, but implementation doesn't necessarily work that way, particularly if they're going on and on and on and on and on, and then you see that this has to stop, and by then it's like too late.
That's why you got to be able to shut their mic off and just notify them your mic's been shut off.
So you're an administrator, are you?
Yeah, that's not teacher's job, administrator's job. Alan is a good administrator. I know he's also a good teacher.
I also shut his mic off.
I know.
Hey, what are you doing?
That was good, Al. I love it.
Some people are talkers. They are wired that way. They just love to talk and talk. There are some people who don't want to talk. They are quiet and quiet and quiet. Even if you pinch them hard, they wouldn't talk. They wouldn't respond. So we are mixed. We are mixed bag. So we have somehow encourage people who do not talk that much and discourage those talkers. I don't know if you have experience with Dennis Pilkington and Bill Hillebrunner. They just love to talk. That I don't know if they have that intention of blocking the main presentation. They're like that. They just want to talk. So those are the things. There's also other teachers, like there's one pastor in San Antonio. He said, like, would you open room for discussions, open questions? Oh my God. They would nail you down. They will kill you if you do that. Don't ever do that. Don't ever open the room for questions. So people are like so underconfident of what they present. Like, you also have people like that. They want to teach and get away, run away from that. Like, they don't want any questions.
Didn't Alan just tell us we can't ask hard questions?
That's
We
his
ask
job.
questions, just
Part
as
of
long
his
as they're not
humor.
hard questions.
Usually, I charge $1 for questions and $5 for hard questions.
That's a good one. What do you do for 20?
You get to insult me in front of the whole world for that.
Multiple choice.
That's good. I knew you'd come up with something, Alan. That's why I had to ask.
In Waco, Texas, it was like more like a classroom. We have a whiteboard, and I have these pens. I would draw like multicolored pens. I will draw diagrams and explain right, left and right. And they keep asking questions and stop me why it is like that. So that was very lively. And they have like about 35 very well managed and very interactive. One time I gave 1.5 hours presentation on red heifer. I took like, I went like 45 minutes ahead of the main presentation time, and I drew all my diagrams. And then before I started the presentation, one gentleman came to me and said, like, you are going to disappoint me because I'm already confused looking at these elaborate pictures. That was scary to him. And then I said, like, it's okay, hang on. And then after 1.5 hours presentation, he came back and said, everything is so clear now. Now you can see. If you don't explain, if you put all these strange diagrams, animal bleeding and the red heifer, and they are burning the heifer and then taking ashes. If you don't know the subject, if you don't know the background, it is really scary for some people. But you have different audience, but interaction was very, very helpful for them because it is a live presentation. People are sitting there. So here it's a different, right? We are electronically connected. It's not live. And also we don't have whiteboard. If you have whiteboard, like it's very, very dynamic. Like if they ask some question, you draw another diagram, whether it looks like snake or not. We'll keep insisting that it is a snake, and everybody will have to agree that it is snake. With my 4 diagrams.
You just keep telling us what it is. We'll figure it out sooner or later.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm taking up a collection right now to send you to art school.
Yeah. I should go along with Genesis to some art school.
To
Learn
GoFundMe.
basic
GoFundMe.
sketches.
Illustrations.
I'd recommend using AI. Dolly is a good one.
I'm extensively using AI now with for the Friday presentations. The bride and groom that you see on the main slide of covenants, right? They are signing.
Right.
That's AI generated it
I
for me.
thought so. Yep, I thought so.
That's a doll. Yeah.
So Tagore, when did you start teaching?
Teaching Bible 5 years ago, maybe 6 years. 2017, they pushed me to teach in Waco, Texas,
Hmm.
on invitation from the brethren. I
Oh.
didn't want to teach. I want to study for my own spiritual growth. So I was studying for many, many years on my own. I would privately share what I studied in discussions, but never on a teacher. I have like very kind of frigid spirit to teach because everybody wanted to teach. And so last thing I want is to teach because I have bad experiences with teachers of being arrogant, being pushy, or being whatever, blah, 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 blah. So I thought I would not teach. Why do I need to teach? First of all, I didn't have any spiritual reason. I don't want to lift myself up. I don't need audience attention. I don't want people to look up to me. All these things like prevented me from teaching. And Rupa also pushed me like, you must teach. But I did have teaching experience. I taught in a semi-engineering college. It's a polytechnic. It's a college, community college like thing. I taught there for 13 years. So I have teaching experience, general teaching experience, but not biblical.
That's
Interesting
about the
God's
same
hand
thing.
and
That's about,
interesting God's hand and how he works things, and here you are.
Yeah, I hated to go for the teaching profession, and my father pushed me. See, that's how God pushes you into something, even though you don't want that. For some unknown reasons, later he uses that experience, perhaps.
He can be high pressure when he wants to. And pressured you.
that's the truth.
Yeah.
I was asked to teach in a technical college as well, and
Mhm.
I didn't give a lot of preparation to the first class I gave, and I got my 3-hour class done in about a half hour. Got through everything. I knew what I was talking about. No one else could figure out what I was saying. So, but I put a few to sleep in that half hour. The next class, next week I taught it. I actually put 40 hours into it. It went a whole lot better.
that helps. Like that experience helps. Like
Yeah.
definitely for everything, like any profession, like you need time and experience and sufficient exposure, how to handle people.
Well, we're going to say good night and God bless y'all. And you're going to be back teaching in 3 weeks, you said, Gabor? Took. Oh man, I'm really slaughtering your name. I still can't get.
Tagore, remember Al
Tagore,
Gore?
Tagore,
Al Gore,
Tagore.
Tagore.
Well, I guess I'm. The only word name I've heard like anywhere is near yours is Zsa Zsa Gabor, and that's probably what's causing it. So
You are
I apologize.
forgiven. You are forgiven because of these foreign names. I understand the difficulty. But
Thanks.
good night. Thank you for coming and contributing.
Well,
We
thank
love
you.
you. We love you both.
We love all of y'all. And
Good night.
goodbye, everybody. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Well, one aspect of teaching is that every family has to have teaching within the family. So if a man has a wife, then there's teaching there. And if there's children, then there's teaching there. So even if there's not public teaching, there is family teaching, which is expressed over and over throughout the scriptures. Men are instructed to do that, but they must address their family concerning the word of God and concerning the things that are written for us. So there's that aspect of teaching. Every man who has a family is required to teach. So there's that aspect of it too.
Moms and dads both must be teaching, should be teaching
Yeah.
their kids. Every family should have their Bible study and prayer together as a family. Maybe rotate including kids.
Mhm.
There should be some like singing together, couple of hymns. And people like wife and husband has frictions and difficulties with their marriage. I recommend only one thing. Every day pray together and go through scriptures together. Read a psalm or 2 psalms together, wife and husband. And pray on your knees together. Every day you do it. And as they did it, the whole problems disappeared. Their financial problems, health problems, emotional difficulties, they just disappeared. So this is basic half an hour, 1 hour families have to spend together with the word of God and God himself with the prayer. I thought that's a great thing families can do together. They can
It
remain as Zion.
It was that way in American society for a long time up until the modern day. It was kind of expected that families would be that way. Not every family, but in a general
Most
sense,
families.
many families were that way in the past.
Rupa
see
has
it-
that. Yeah.
You see it reflected in a lot of the old movies that show Americana of days gone by. You know, it's all kind of taken a severe shift away from that now.
Yeah, you have long work hours now.
Yeah.
And children have long school days and many other things that are pulling them away from the home. So
Yeah.
there's not, they have a quick snack for breakfast and dash out the door. And sometimes they're even eating breakfast at school and not at home.
Yeah.
And they just don't, they're not a family, let's put it that way. We taught our daughters at home until the oldest one reached 9th grade. And that worked out well. And we spent more time with them. And then they went to high school, and we asked them how the school day went. And they said, oh, it went fine. And so finally, Marlene went and signed up to be a substitute teacher so she could find out what's going on in school. And that worked out well. She found out.
Rupa has a similar background. They're Methodists. Every day they will have prayer meeting around 5 p.m. Their cousins and their relatives and their friends and other Christians in the street and next street, about 35 to 40 people would gather every day. They would sing hymns and they will go through some chapters of Bible, and they have light refreshments every day. no matter what work you have, they would stop that work and come to that prayer meeting. They have very stable families for a very, very long time. And in spite of the difficulties, they were at peace with each other and peace with God. And after many years, this tradition was broken down, and there was a colossal stress-related issues came up with the family. That somehow heals and keeps things in order. We can't logically explain, but just singing few hymns and going through scriptures and showing that reverence to God every day. We care. This is more important than something else.
Yeah, it's like the verse we read earlier.
Yeah.
In Revelation, strengthen those things which remain. That was a daily strengthening routine that you had there. That you die not.
Yeah, there you
Stop.
go.
You stop doing that, and then you start to die. The dying process.
Yeah.